We're going through Matthew right now, and we are in chapter 5. And so to kind of catch everyone up, we are going through the Gospel of Matthew. The main reason is this time next year we will be doing a sermon series on Matthew. We have a late Easter, and whenever we have a late Easter, we like to do a gospel. So we will start in Advent going through Matthew all the way through Easter. And one thing that Mark and I have decided to do next year as well is because we're on Sundays, we're short on time, we won't be able to spend a lot of time on the Beatitudes. The Wednesday night Lent sermon series will be on the Beatitudes. Not the Beatitudes, but the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount, what we're going through right now. So that's the plan. So we are writing sermons right now, right? Like over there. So that's a good thing. Matthew is very, very Jewish in his understanding and thinking, and we see that there's all this idea of the Messiah coming, recalling all the ways of how God saved his people over there through, there's these alliterations to the whole nations, that kind of the blessing of Abraham through the wise men. You see the alliterations to the God saving his people go through the Exodus. And then Jesus has gone through the temptations just like we're tempted just like we are, and now he has called some of his disciples. There's great healings and all that stuff. And now what chapters 5, 6, and 7 are is kind of the greatest hits. So Matthew has been working to establish Jesus as the Messiah. And then what he's doing now is he's showing us what Jesus' teachings were, about the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of the skies, you could call it, or the empire of the skies. Like this, allow these, the kingdom of heaven is kind of what he calls it there. And so all these things are going to be going over there. So what's interesting is the Bible Project, who creates all those videos for us. They are going through the Sermon on the Mount right now, and all of their stuff. And they just released a video, an explainer video on the Sermon on the Mount. And so I think we should watch that, and so we can kind of see what it is. And because the Bible Project is really good about distilling a lot of information quickly, and you get to kind of see the structure at how the Sermon on the Mount is, how Matthew put it together. Put the words of Jesus together in a way that we can see with intentionality. So, we're going to watch that, and so here we go. Let's see. Let me make sure that I'm good. Oh, I am good. So we're going to share the screen, share it with this screen, and then this button. All right, there it is, and here we go.
Gospel of Matthew is one of the earliest accounts of Jesus of Nazareth.
And in chapters 5 through 7, we find a collection of Jesus' most well-known teachings, often called the Sermon on the Mount. Here we learn what Jesus means when he announces that the kingdom of the sky is here, and what it looks like to participate in that.
What'd you say?
The volume is echoing.
It's echoing? All right, I can fix that. Can I fix it from this screen? I know what the problem is. 2 seconds. I can't fix it from the screen. All right, hold on. 1 second. Uh-oh.
God's kingdom. The whole sermon has been given to 3.
I got to stop sharing the screen for a second. All right, and then all right. Let me know if this doesn't help.
Shape. There's the introduction, then the large main body, and then the conclusion.
It's a little better, but it's still also
the surprising counter.
Let me know if it gets better.
Of those who were part. Then comes the main body of teaching, where Jesus explores what he means when he calls his followers righteous.
What does he mean by righteousness?
Righteousness is about living in right relationship with God and with others. It's a character trait that creates justice and peace in the world. And the body of the sermon is like Jesus' manifesto on righteousness, examined from three angles and three big parts. How this righteousness relates to the Torah, how this righteousness relates to religious practices of this day, and how this righteousness is expressed in our relationships with God and with neighbor. Finally, Jesus concludes the sermon by calling people to make a choice about how they're going to respond.
Okay, I see it. Three main parts of this whole sermon. And the middle part itself has three parts.
Right. And then every one of these parts itself has three parts. There is a lot of design and structure of the Sermon on the Mount. We are going to go over all of it. In the introduction, Jesus offers a surprise announcement to the people standing in front of him. They are invited to experience the good life of God's kingdom. He first offers 9 sayings that redefine who is experiencing the good life, commonly called the Beatitudes. Here we learn that those entering God's kingdom first are the lowly outsiders who hunger for righteousness and suffer as peacemakers.
Next, Jesus calls his followers salt of the land. What's this all about?
In the Hebrew scriptures, salt is a symbol of God's long-lasting covenant relationship with Israel. So Jesus is claiming that he and his followers are carrying Israel's covenant relationship to its fulfillment.
Next, Jesus calls them the light of the world and a city set up on a mountain.
Jesus is referencing here a promise from the prophet Isaiah that one day the inhabitants of Jerusalem will reflect God's light, peace, and blessing to all the world.
So Jesus is saying that he and his followers are fulfilling that promise.
Right. And how they go about doing that is what the rest of the Sermon on the Mount is all about.
Now, in the main body of the sermon, Jesus calls his followers to do righteousness.
Righteousness means living in right relationship with God and with others. And Jesus explores his vision of righteousness from 3 perspectives, resulting in 3 big parts to the main body of the sermon.
The first perspective is that his teachings about righteousness fulfill the Torah and the prophets. What does this mean?
Well, the Torah and prophets refer to the Hebrew scriptures. And this big idea that Jesus fulfills them, it's unpacked in 3 parts. First, Jesus claims that he's not setting aside the laws of the Torah. Rather, he's bringing Israel's story and all its laws to their completion. Next, Jesus offers 6 case studies of how his righteousness fulfills the Torah. He explores the topics of anger, lust, divorce, telling the truth, revenge, and enemy love. Finally, Jesus sums up this way of life as teleos, a Greek word that means complete or whole. The purpose of the Torah is to teach people God's wisdom so they can become mature, whole people who spread God's blessing to the world. And this call to become whole and complete links back to this section's beginning, where Jesus claims that living by his teachings will fulfill the Torah.
Next, Jesus looks at how his righteousness relates to the religious practices of his day. Now, this section has 3 parts.
Right. In the first part, Jesus claims that living in right relationship with God and others results in a reward. But be careful, Jesus says, because if you're doing your righteousness to get public praise, then you'll miss out on the real reward that God has in store.
Next, Jesus gives 3 examples of how religious devotion can go sideways. His examples are generosity to the poor, prayer, and fasting.
In each of these, Jesus challenges his followers to express their devotion to God in subtle ways that don't attract attention. Then he completes this section by teaching about what the real reward is.
Yeah, he says, don't store up for yourself treasure on the land, but store up for yourself treasure in the sky. So what is this sky treasure?
Well, this idea of treasure links back to Jesus' opening claim that true righteousness brings a reward. The greatest treasure is not admiration from people. Rather, the real reward is knowing and being known by a loving God of the universe.
And that leaves this third and final perspective, how doing righteousness affects our relationship with God and neighbor.
Now, this section itself has 3 parts. First, Jesus talks about money and possessions.
Why start with money?
Well, our stuff tends to claim our allegiance and causes us to worry. And so our relationship to our stuff can be one of the biggest obstacles to healthy relationships with God and with other people.
Jesus teaches, don't store up your stuff on the land. Rather, store up treasure in the sky.
Then Jesus gives 2 parables. One is about two kinds of eyes you can have: a healthy, generous eye, or an evil, stingy eye. The second parable focuses on two masters you can serve: God or money. Then Jesus gives a beautiful homily about worry. Why chase after security from things that are ultimately insecure? Jesus invites us to trust the generous God of creation who cares about us more than we can imagine.
That's the first part. Next, Jesus directly addresses our relationship with God and neighbor.
Yeah, this section begins with, "Do not judge others, or you too will be judged." Then come two more parables, another about eyes, how you shouldn't try to remove a speck out of someone else's eye.
Or do you have a log in your own?
Then comes a parable about not tossing holy pearls to pigs and dogs. It's a riddle with multiple meanings, but essentially it's about using discernment when we try to help and correct others. Then, because relationships are so complex, Jesus encourages his disciples to ask God for the wisdom they need. Ask, seek, and knock, and the door will be open to you.
This section of the Sermon on the Mount ends with the golden rule. Do to others what you want them to do to you.
Jesus says that this simple teaching is what the Torah and prophets are all about. And so the golden rule concludes the third perspective on doing righteousness. And it also links us back to the opening of the main body of the sermon, where Jesus said he came to bring the Torah and prophets to their completion.
Finally, we're going to look at the last major section of the sermon, the conclusion.
Here, Jesus places a choice in front of his listeners about how they're going to live their lives.
Now, the section has 3 parts.
And each one illustrates this choice with a different image. The first image is about two paths with two different gates. One leads to life and the other to ruin. Second is about discerning between two kinds of leaders who claim to represent God. They're like two kinds of trees, one good and one bad. Not everyone who says they speak for God really does. But Jesus says you will know a tree by its fruit. The last image is about two types of houses you can build. If you ignore Jesus and build your house by your own wisdom, it's like building on sand at good luck when the storm comes. But if you listen to him and build your house with Jesus' wisdom, you are building your house. And with that, the Sermon on the Mount comes to a close.
Okay, so let's review the whole sermon. It begins with a surprise announcement about how the good life, God's kingdom, has come to the least likely. And then, in the main body, Jesus teaches how to do right by God and others. And finally, the conclusion calls for a decision. In light of everything Jesus has said, what choice will you make?
It's a great summary. Now it's time to read and then reread and reread again the Sermon on the Mount.
Our mission at Bible Project is
All
to
right.
help people experience the Bible as you.
You don't have to watch the end there. I'll let you not watch that. Like that's, So there was a certain number there that would repeated a lot. What number was that?
3.
But yes, 7. But 3s, lots of 3s, right? Lots of 3s. So like 3s are everywhere, and some of you have heard me talk about this before. The 3 is important in the Hebrew language. The entire Hebrew language, every word can be declined down to a verb. Okay, and now there's some outliers there, but pretty much every word in Hebrew can be declined down to its root is 3 characters. All right, so the Hebrew language is everything is balanced. Okay, like so that's when you allow that to kind of understand how that language works, because language, a lot of our culture is you see is formed in language. So like you hear like French or Spanish and all that stuff, it's much more flowy and just kind of all that. Russian is really harsh, and that's so you see kind of the people in that. Well, in the Hebrew language, especially Old Hebrew, I can't really speak to the current stuff, but it's very balanced. It's very balanced. So when you think about things coming out of Hebrew culture and the Bible and all that stuff, balance is important. So when you just saw the structure of the Sermon on the Mount, you saw balance, right? And it's all put together. I think a lot of times it's like, oh, it's just a list. Jesus said this on Tuesday. He said this in the afternoon. He said that, like, that's not how it's written, right? Like, it's not like it's written in an order to tell you something. And then in these threes are everywhere. I love the creation story. You have the 7 days of creation, but it's actually 6. The seventh day there was rest, and then there's 3 days. There's light, the separation of the waters, sky above, water below, and then pulling dry ground out. And then the next 3 days, 4, 5, and 6 are filling out those. So the first day was light, then you have sun, moon, stars, and then you have this. The second day was the separation of the waters, the sky above and the waters below, and you have the creation of the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And the last days you have all the things that creep and move. It's these threes again. Like, this is this incredible structure all through the Bible, telling us something of balance and means. It's not just chaos type of thing here. And then this is written in a very similar fashion. And I really like going through that video when I watched it yesterday, because it came out yesterday. Like, that video, I was like, oh yeah, this is good, because I had no idea. Like, this, I'm fundamentally, like, I'm an idiot in a lot of ways, and so, like, that's really cool. So did anyone have any thoughts on that they would like to say before we read? We'll probably read chapter 5, at least maybe half of chapter 5. Anyone have any thoughts? Nothing? Cool. You guys were talking like crazy before class. All right, so let me get on the right screen over here, and then we can read the old Bible here. All right, so how far should we go? See, I want to start with verse 1 again. And then, let's just go ahead and
She's going through 20.
20? Okay, 20. So let's go through 20. So let's do 1 through 20 here at the beginning, as we kind of talk about all this stuff. So here we go. So Matthew 5, 1 through 20. And so use whichever Bible that you would like. Use whatever Bible that you would like. Jerry, you're pretty much the newest one here. We use the New King James for listening to it, but it's important to read whatever Bible that you have in there. And if there's anything meaningfully different, you can just bring it up. But just letting you know. All right.
Okay, I've got the Lutheran Study Bible.
Excellent. There's a lot of people that have that here too. All right, so here we go.
And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain. Seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven.
Okay. All right. So let's stop there. Let me change the sound profile real quick. Okay. So, all right. So we kind of talked about the Beatitudes last week. One thing the Bible Project is doing, and I kind of like, they're trying to reframe that blessed term, because that term gets so used now. Like the millennial joke is like #blessed, like all those things. Like that word is just, it's overused. It's not meaningless, but it's kind of gotten like there's a bunch of things. So the way that they've been describing it is like, the good life is, the good life is for like those who are like low in spirit, the poor in spirit type of thing. And it kind of means that same thing, but all of a sudden it makes you think about it differently. They said it a few times in the video if you caught it. Like that's, and so like, the good life is for those who mourn, because they'll be comforted. And the mourning there is grieving. Like I think we kind of know that, but that's, we're so familiar with these, at least I am, that like changing the words, like all of a sudden makes my mind light up. So, the good life is for those who grieve. This one, when they talked about, I thought was really interesting. The good life are for the unimportant, the meek. They described it as the unimportant. And I really resonated with that, because you can kind of see what's saying here is that we often fight not to grieve. We often fight to be important. We fight for all these things, and it's interesting how it's going for all of this. The verse 6. The good life is those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They said righteousness there is probably closer to the word we use today, justice, how we use the word today, justice. Who hunger and thirst for justice. And that's kind of, that makes that, makes you sit a little bit there, and so, the merciful and all those things. But I kind of want to lead into that. With those kind of things that I saw from the Bible Project this week, and I thought that they were helpful. So what did you hear? What stands out to you in this section as we go on here? I talked too much last week, so I'm trying not to talk this week.
Well, something that stood out to me was when on verse 19.
Yeah.
Verse 19, they say in the translation he used on the video, it says, whoever breaks one of these least of these commandments. In the Lutheran Study Bible that I have, it simply says whoever relaxes it.
Relaxes them. What?
Yeah.
Like says as well.
So that's what the ESV says. What do other translations have? That does anyone have an NIV or
Anyone who breaks
anyone who breaks? What is this?
NIV.
Is it NIV? So NIV, anyone who breaks
I have relaxes.
relaxes. Okay, so we have relaxes, breaks, like, and that's and so that's that's a good catch, Jerry. So like so we look at that, and so you kind of see the work that's being done by the translators there, where they're trying to get across what's actually happening. They're trying to translate what's being communicated here. So breaks, relaxes. It's not too much of a different idea when you're talking about not, it's if someone went it to you and you're like, you broke a commandment. It's like, what, did I drop it? Like that. That's kind of a, we understand that. Like the word sin really means to fail is really what that. So like if you're running a marathon and your knee gives out and you don't finish, you sinned a marathon, type of idea. And so that's kind of that idea. Break is also kind of that there, kind of in failing all these.
Message.
No, the Message says trivialize even the smallest item in God's law, and you will have trivialized yourself. Like that. So that's the idea of that relax. And also I think that's a good thing of breaking, like meaning that you're not holding it as higher type of thing. Yeah.
Mine says falling short.
Falling short. That's that sin language there again. There's that sin language again there. That failing, falling short. Yeah. Good. So what else kind of stood out to you? What else stood out to you?
He's basically saying that the scribes and the Pharisees don't know what they're doing.
The scribes and the Pharisees?
Yeah, line 20. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees.
Are you telling me that you're hearing a little sarcasm in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's saying, all the hoop-de-doo and wada that they go through, they're not even making a dent.
Yeah.
You're missing the mark by 100 plus.
Yeah. And unless you're as righteous as all of those guys, and they're all watching as he's saying these.
Right.
Because Jesus, this is probably the best of list of what Jesus preached. So he's probably preaching this all over the countryside. These same ideas and all these things, and all these scribes and Pharisees are watching him, and Jesus is probably pointing at him, and he's like, unless you can be as righteous as those guys over there, you're like, which you think about it, you put yourself in that situation, it's like, oh my gosh. And one of my favorite things to think about when I'm reading the gospel is like, no wonder they wanted to kill him. Like he's just constantly poking the bear. And everyone else, because the bear is always chewing on everybody else. And everyone's like, oh, he's actually standing up to them. He's actually teaching with some authority here. These guys just,
He also uses the word never. Not maybe you'll make it, or he kind of, but you will never.
No.
I mean, that's a stamp.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, by no means you'll never enter the kingdom of the sky. So so he's already saying some stuff there that's really interesting. Kathy,
This is like Jesus equivalent to the commandments. He's giving these laws and saying you break them.
Yeah, and so what's also going on here is that, especially in this section, that really kind of begins with 17 and kind of goes through here a little bit. It's kind of a recoloring of the commandments, like what often happens is that we will have laws in our hands, and scoundrels will get a hold of laws and they will start misappropriating them and start using them to hold people down rather than to rise them up. Like and so, like the 10 commandments are all about loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. That's how Jesus described it. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Like all those things. Like that's the whole point. And so, but you start seeing how Jesus starts using language like, oh, they're devouring widows' homes. These who are righteous, like, and that's all those things. So yeah, there's all this law language, but it's turning it around. It's putting it where it's not in service to the powerful anymore, but it's to those that we just talked about in the Beatitudes. The good life is for the unimportant.
Themselves.
Yeah. And so that's all right. What else did you notice? Nobody noticed anything? Most famous sermon given. Like that's
One thing.
Yeah.
In verse 14, you are the light of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You are. It's not an option.
Yeah.
You want to be or not. You are.
You are the light of the world. Yeah. And that's connected to the seasoning right before it. The saltiness. Like this good seasoning. One of my favorite memes, and I like this meme. All right. And there's a certain amount of pride that comes with this. I'm from the South. Many of you, not all of you, from the Midwest. And your cuisine has a certain unseasonedness to it. Like that. There's one of my favorite videos that came out. It exploded onto the scene. It would take too long to get to it, but these people did a Cajun boil, and they dumped all of the potatoes and all that stuff out on there, the corn, and all and all the crawfish and all that stuff. And it was obvious that they if they used any seasoning at all, there was like everything was just white. Like on that crawfish boil, and everyone is like, this kept getting shared and shared like, oh goodness, like they weren't using the language sin, but I think we could use that as a sin for a crawfish boil to come out. And I think that is kind of what's going on here. Yeah, Fred.
Well, this is coming from somebody who eats at the Waffle House.
Yeah, no. Listen, Waffle House is Southern hibachi. All right, it's the Waffle House is Southern hibachi. I will not stand for disrespect of Southern hibachi.
Still not open yet.
I know. Like that's yeah. It's right there. They're cooking right in front of you. Like that's all right. But I love that idea. It's like you are the salt of the earth, but what happens when you lose your flavor? Like, and he's leading us in to this whole sermon, and the sermon's kind of like, here's the flavor. Here's the flavor. And it makes me really think like that's, I think a lot of us churches, we specialize in making sure that the crawfish boil has no seasoning, right? And we're like, isn't this good news? And everyone's looking around and going, you seem like you've lost your flavor, type of thing, right? Like that's, and kind of getting in, and you see Jesus he's just shaking the Cajun seasoning just all over. We're not going to have any. Don't worry, we're going to have bland pancakes at the Mardi Gras party, like all that. But no, we're actually going to have like pie filling and stuff like that to put on top of them and stuff. It's going to be fun. And I should be booking a band today, so that'll be fun.
You're definitely adding seasoning.
Yeah, we're adding seasoning. So, but think about what he's saying. Like we often get caught on the salt. And I grew up like you are the salt of the earth. But like when you look at it, it's like, oh yeah, it's that seasoning. It's the goodness, like it's like you're adding stuff in your community. You're not taking things away. You're adding to it. You're adding goodness and everything. I mean, after all, you're such seasoning. When we go into what Carol said, like you're the light, right? Like everything else is darkness. It's like, would you put a basket over the light? Like, no. And you can tell he's staring right at the Pharisees and those guys that like to talk from stages while wearing white robes, right? Like he's staring right at them. Like that's, are you squelching everything? Are you trying to stop it all, right? Like that's, so let the seasoning, let the light shine before everyone else.
Pastor,
Yeah.
wasn't salt also a preservative? No.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's not even just a preservative. Like that's where we got salary from. Like
Yeah,
salt
because
was
it's
everything.
monetary. That's how the Roman soldiers were paid. And
Yeah. Yeah. But that's also, yeah, like that's everything. But it's that idea of like adding to it and all that too. Like that's, so yeah, like no, I mean, that's definitely part of it. It's preservative. It's adding all of these things. Like so much of our food has so much salt in it. Like you don't really put that much on it anymore. But like you got to have that salt. Hello.
I'm a purity, please. Is he teaching right doctrine?
Everyone already knows the answer is no. Ed is starting to do shut-in visits for us, so that's great. So if you're talking to anyone who's doing shut-in visits, visitation, bringing communion, stuff like that, he's starting to do that for us. Yeah, so that's very good news. That's very good news. Okay. All right. So what else stood out to you? What else stood out?
Well, he proclaims that he is adding to the law of the prophets. He's stating,
Where's that?
I have not come to abolish the law of the prophets, but to fulfill them.
Yeah.
And then basically he's adding to them. So
Yeah. And I think that's because he's going to get, like, if we remember why they crucify him, they crucify Jesus because they think that he's basically getting rid of the law and the prophets, right? Like that's why that, and he's like, no, like I'm just showing you what they really are. I've show you what the whole point behind all of this is. Like that's because it's easy for us to make law the point, but the point is watching over people, making sure people are okay. Like that's like keeping all these things that's what Jesus is going to go in here. He says, like, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or tittle will by no means pass from the law till it's all fulfilled. Like he's like, this could all go away. Like that's so then he uses some sarcasm, and we've already talked about this, but and because we see what he means by all of this when he dies and rises again, he's like, you can't fulfill any of this unless you keep everything, and as righteous as all those guys over there that are holding you down, you're not going to make any of it. And we see what all that means when we get to the end of the book, when he dies and rises again, that he was all that for us. So the other thing is the verse 11 and 12, how good it is for when people revile you and persecute you, say all kinds of evil against you falsely, like rejoice and be glad. Like that's like the amount of people that claim persecution all while putting on their sackcloth and ashes for everyone to see is astonishing. Like that's like, no, rejoice, clean yourself up, rejoice in it. Like you're doing stuff, right? So like that's the way it is, and that's difficult. Did I not say anything controversial enough to get anyone talking? All right.
Not that.
Yeah.
It says up here, it's interesting to me. He says that not until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter or least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished.
Yeah.
And it seems like it is finished. It's
Yeah.
an accomplishment.
Yeah.
And so the law changes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's good. Was that this week? I don't know. Either this last Sunday, it's not in the sermon, but it's sermon adjacent. Either the readings from Ephesians this last week or this coming up week, Paul basically quotes that it is finished.
Mhm.
And he doesn't say it in those words so many times, but like he's quoting that kind of idea when he's talking about kind of living in the kingdom of God and of all this is being accomplished and stuff like that. So that's good. That's good. All right, before we read the next section, anything else? All right, let's do 21 through 48. 21 through 48. Oh, before I do that, let me make it so it won't, I need to remember to do this. Make it so it won't echo on the people online.
Can you mute the speaker here? That might be what the echo is coming.
It is, but I'm basically doing that in software.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, so let's see here. So 21, here we go. And remember, 17 through 20 is connected to this. It's leading it all in.
You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment." I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, "Raca," shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, "You fool," shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge. The judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord." But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no, no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect.
Okay. All right. So all kinds of fun stuff in there. Before I talk, what stands out?
It always amazes me that they throw people in prison and say you can't get out till you paid your debt.
Yeah.
How are you going to pay your debt if you're in prison?
Yeah. Good old debtors' prisons, huh? like that's like yeah, exactly like that. So you got to work it off with the commissary. You know?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Good friend.
Yeah. Like that. That's debtors' prisons. Debtors' prisons are no good for society. Like that.
Pastor, I was just wondering, verses 31 and 32, where it talks about divorce.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what are the LCMS viewpoints on that section right there about divorce?
All right, so the I'm trying to look up something here for yes. So I was wondering how long it was going to take someone to ask questions about basically the adultery stuff and the divorce stuff. What you have to remember here is that we're hitting commonality, we're hitting similar notes. So what we have to do is we have to look around and see what are these different notes are. Hey Jerry, can you mute yourself? I'm getting an echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just unmute yourself if you want to talk again. So there's a so Jesus saying, you've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Go an extra mile, love your enemies. That's the same note. That's the same melody as when he's talking about adultery and the divorce here. Okay? A lot of times we hear this and we immediately I think we allow our law-centric side of our brain to take over this. Remember, Jesus is talking to people who have been used and abused from all of this stuff, right? Like this is the same melody as blessed are the unimportant. Okay. Blessed are the meek. Like you have to remember that when you're doing the work in here. So this is an important distinction here, because in that time and place, women had way lesser standings. Now there's women that are around Jesus who are of great means, and they bankroll a bunch of stuff. And there's powerful women that are in the Bible. But by and large, if someone is a widow, they don't have any means, there's not much that they can do, right? And so like that is a huge scourge. It's why we always talk about widows in the Bible. That's why it's kind of always kind of talked about here, because this is someone that has found themselves on the bottom of society. So when you look at all of this, the adultery and the marriage and divorce there, you can see that there are probably, and I'm kind of guessing, but these are informed guesses, there are probably, by people who are in power around here, systems that are set up to take advantage of people, right?
What, excuse me, what perhaps you are too young to appreciate.
Okay.
I
appreciate you saying stuff like that.
In verse 28, however, many around this table and on the screen would. Verse 28, when I read it, the following stream of consciousness occurred. Playboy magazine, Jimmy Carter, running for election, using scripture for your own purpose. All intersecting right here.
Yeah.
Something that you're preaching constantly. It's in our confession.
Yeah.
And here it is again. If you're merely thinking about it, you're lusting in your heart. This is a very potent quote, which is also susceptible to exploitation by those in power.
Yes. And that's why I wanted to say, thank you, Mick, that the love your enemies, go the second mile, all this stuff, you are the flavor, you are like all that stuff. It's the same melody as all of these. And I think we allow ourselves to have that melody when we're talking about the murder, because we're like, yeah, like that makes sense. I talk about this when we talk about the fifth commandment all the time, that we break the commandment even when we even have a phrase for it. You're dead to me. When we cast someone out of our lives, like that's that same sense. That's how Jesus is understanding it. That's Luther's understanding of the fifth commandment comes a lot from Jesus here, and his understanding of adultery is too. But oftentimes we'll weasel our ways around it, and we'll weasel it in such a way that we end up trying to put people in subjugation to us, and we'll do it in these ways. And I think that's kind of what he's doing. We also need to talk about the hell word. Okay, we got to talk about that for a second, because he says hellfire, and then he says, like was verse 30, he's like cast into hell. That's Gehenna in Greek. I just looked it up. It's Gehenna. That's the town dump. All right. That's the town dump. Gehenna is a valley. And have you ever been to a dump in somewhere that's not in the first world? Like a dump. Like I'll always remember. So when we were in Arkansas, just the UP. Yeah. Gosh.
Can you believe he says stuff like that?
Yeah. Okay. So I was in Arkansas, and we used to do a lot in Guatemala. Kind of like how we do Haiti stuff here. We did Guatemala stuff there. And one of our missions were there were people that lived in the dump outside of Guatemala City. And I learned something. There's a huge eye disease by people who live at the dump because it's always on fire. It's always smoking. Because you get all that stuff and the pressure and all that stuff, it just ignites. Our dumps are a miracle. I mean, they're almost beautiful as you look at the only mountains we have around here, right? like that. That's as we pass them on the freeway, going around there. But like, yeah, and the reason, and they're really controlled and all that stuff. And like one of the things that will be an interesting investing opportunity eventually is there's a lot of like precious stuff in those, and like mining this. A lot of dumps already currently are using them to create methane, great power sources. So you think about none of those controls, those places would just be on fire all the time. And so when you look at this, he's saying your whole body will be thrown into Gehenna. And like, think about what all these people would see. They would know those people, because doing that stuff in Guatemala, that changed my whole perspective on this whole thing, because I know the people at the bottom of the society there live at the dump because they can't live anywhere else. And they just scrounge and forage for things like that. It's hell on earth, you know? And it's like, and he's saying like, you'll be cast in there. Yeah. And it's all this, so it's this backwards stuff. And it's very visceral, and everyone there would know exactly what he's talking about. Like and don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not denying hell or anything like that. I'm just telling you what Jesus said. Okay. Like, so that's the, and so it's very visceral, and people could probably taste it, you know, what it's like to be there as he's talking about it, you know? And so like so that whole idea of adultery and using marriage and divorce, I think it gets talked about later. And it's a much more accusatory, straight at the Sadducees. The Sadducees want to know about, you know, if someone dies and dies and dies again, you know, this lady's been married 5 times and passed around, whose wife is she, like all that stuff. And like, he brings it up again later on, and it's the same point. It's like, you're talking about the wrong stuff. You're so worried about the power structures and how they're going to fall that you're forgetting about that woman. Like that's, and I think that's what's going on here. You know, you're forgetting about like the adultery. You're forgetting about the people that this is affecting. You're in the divorce. You're forgetting. You're just doing whatever you want. Like that's instead, you know, stop making stupid oaths. You know, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Go the second mile. Stop like I'm being repressed. No, go the next mile. You know, like all this stuff. Like, are you adding seasoning to that crawfish boil, or are you taking seasoning out and you're serving everyone bland crawfish? And there's no higher sin than that, right? Like that's, are you going to a restaurant that's not as good as the Waffle House? Yeah, like that's it's fun, right, Jim? Yeah, like that's like it does have Tabasco sauce. I know. They got Texas Pete too. They got, and the move at the Waffle House, y'all, when you go there, if you go savory, you get the hash browns and you get chili on them. You order it topped with the chili.
Yeah, there's smothered, colored.
Topped is the chili. Yeah, topped is the chili. It's you can have plain hash browns if you want. You can live a life that makes Jesus sad. Or you can put chili on your hash browns. Yeah, like that. That's and so like that's.
So your eggs.
But to kind of put a bow on all this, please, to put a bow on all this, I think that's a pretty good bow, though, right? That's very visceral what I just said. Yeah, is that Jesus is getting to the point where it's like, yeah, it's a lot of this law stuff in there, because we can be, when it becomes about us doing things physically, we can weasel out of a lot of this stuff, and you know, we all kind of realize it's like, yeah, I mean, like. My heart hasn't always been in this. I've done things to people, all that stuff, but it really hasn't been into this. And you know, it's kind of getting us to that point where the law matters. He says he's fulfilling the law, right? So so that's kind of where we are right now. Were there any other questions, thoughts, all of that stuff? We're up against time, but anything else?
I think it's interesting that he talks about cutting your hand off or your eye out.
Yeah.
And yet, if you think about it, a blind man can lust after somebody. He doesn't have to, or something.
Yeah.
And the same with a triple, a man who's crippled or can also do things that would be, so he's not really specific about eyes and parts. And he's talking in the general terms.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It's not literal, I don't think.
No. Like it's pushing us towards a severity and a realization.
Right.
You know, it's helping us see that it's like, oh yeah, that stuff that's inside of us, it's not good. It's not good. And so it's important. And we're going to continue going through that as we come through here. And it's with Jesus, it's always about blessed are the meek, blessed are the unimportant. So you got to go. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Vance. All right. Thank you for joining us today. For everyone that's watching on YouTube on the pre-recorded stuff, thanks for joining us today.